Hey there, everybody, and welcome to this month's Audio Production Town Hall. I'm Brian Smithers. I'm the Program Director of Audio Production here at Full Sail, and we're excited to have you for this month's broadcast. I want to call your attention to the fact that the Audio Production Town Hall is here every month, typically on Monday of week 4 of whatever class you may be in. You can come back to this same YouTube channel or find us on a story on FS1. It's also usually announced in all of your classes. The town hall is a chance for all of us, regardless of what point you are in the audio production program, to just get together around the old audio nerd water cooler and talk about some things that are of general interest to audio people. We've talked about mixing and mastering and the business of dance music. We mic'd a drum kit 3 different ways that you can do with your launch box. We've talked with software and hardware manufacturers and all kinds of special guests. So we try to keep it interesting and keep it diverse and keep it real. So this month we're talking with Full Sail Hall of Famer, Emmy-winning Sound Supervisor, and all-around great guy, Fernando Delgado. Welcome to the town hall, Fernando.
Thanks for having me.
So in coming up with a concise way to describe you to our students, I've found a variety of challenges because you've done a bunch of different things, and a lot of what you've become really successful at is not something that we can point to, you learned to do this in this class, in your degree program. So the fact that you're versatile and the fact that you have applied your skill set in ways that weren't necessarily immediately obvious on graduation day fascinates and inspires me. How would you describe your gig?
Well, I think it depends on the day. Every production is different. And because of that, everybody does production a little different. So the hats that I wear tend to change depending on the production that I get hired to do. Right. I wish I could tell somebody I'm a this engineer, I'm a that engineer, but I have a hard time describing what I do to people as well. Sometimes I'm a supervisor, sometimes I'm mixing, sometimes I'm doing intercoms, sometimes I'm doing all of it. So it just really depends on what the production is on any given day.
You used a word a few minutes ago as we were just chatting that I think is really important, because regardless of whether you're talking about the creative aspect of what you're doing or the technical aspect of what you're doing, it all boils down to different forms of troubleshooting, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it really comes down to the fundamentals. And understanding the fundamentals and leaning on that, I think, has been what has helped me through all these various types of productions. Yeah.
So when you first came to Full Sail, what did you see yourself doing upon graduation?
Well, I came to Full Sail to make records. I think a lot of students that first come here have their eye on one specific thing. I've just never made any records. I never made it that far in the music recording business to record records. Instead, I've done all sorts of different types of television shows and productions of every flavor, except for music production, ironically.
Well, a lot of the time, the path that we take in our career depends not just on our original focus, but on the things we learn along the way and the opportunities that present themselves and the way that the business changes in front of us as we're trying to work our way down the road.
Right. Yeah, I think the one thing that has really helped me was I was never really fixated on one area of the business. It's really the one thing I've always been fixated on is microphones. If there's a microphone involved, I'm probably your guy. And I can get the job done, because in all the various productions that I've done, the one common denominator is there's always microphones.
Right. Well, and what is there that exists in modern society where there's not a microphone?
Right. Right, and every type of production needs it. And so if you can record, it doesn't matter if you're recording music, television, commercials, podcasts. I've done a lot of those recently, which I never thought I would do. So yeah, I always say yes. If there's a microphone involved and you're willing to pay my rate, then I'm in.
That's great. So you mentioned podcasting, TV, live TV, scripted TV, reality TV, films.
All of it. I mean,
all of
just this year, I just got done doing a project for Sphere, where we got to record David Gilmour's shows at MSG in New York. That was pretty amazing.
Wow.
Just before that, I just wrapped a season of Kitchen Nightmares with Gordon Ramsay. Earlier this year, we were doing podcasts for, I guess maybe it wasn't this year, but Super Bowl was in Vegas, which is where I'm from. And ironically, a lot of the work that we got for Super Bowl was tied to podcasts rather than TV shows, which has really never happened before.
Yeah.
So, you know, just right there, 3 different types of productions where you would think that they would hire 3 different people or 3 different engineers that have different skill sets.
Right.
But again, at the end of the day, I'm just recording microphones. So, so yeah, it's just, I think the big thing is just being open to taking work that, you know, maybe, I don't know, I just feel like people get really niched. And that's always been my goal, is to never really get niched anywhere. I just want to be known as a really good engineer.
That's great. I'm curious about the Sphere project. So this is the Las Vegas Sphere, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you recorded a show at Madison Square Garden for reproduction in the Sphere?
It was a test.
Okay.
So it's not something that I don't think anybody's ever actually going to see. But I've been very fortunate to, I worked with the gentleman that's in charge of audio capture for Sphere. Him and I did some projects together, some 360 projects actually. We did Lollapalooza together a bunch of years ago, and now he's staff at Sphere. So anytime he comes to Vegas, I'm his guy. So it's kind of cool how things worked out.
Yeah.
I've been able to do, I did 2 of the U2 shows, a couple of the Dead & Company shows, and then most recently the David Gilmour shows.
That's cool. So I imagine capturing that can be remarkably complex if you're trying to capture it for that kind of immersive environment.
Well, what we were really focused on was crowds. So, so we were recording everything that the band was putting out. Their engineers handled the majority of it. We just took feeds.
Right.
But then what we did in addition to that is we basically painted the venue with microphones. And the whole idea was, especially for U2, which I'm pretty sure they're going to do for Dead & Company as well, but for U2, it was so that they could show the performance, the U2 performance at Sphere,
right.
Which I believe is showing now. And so all of the crowd sounds, I helped Ben, who's the head of audio over at Sphere, helped him deploy all the mics and record everything.
That's wild. So where can you put microphones to record a crowd while you actually have a whole live performance going on?
In the crowd, in the audience. Yeah, we had, you know, I think the Sphere is 4 levels. I think it's either 3 or 4 levels. I don't quite remember. But we put microphones all over the venue. Wow. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was easy, right? Because we're not dealing with artists. We're not dealing with we're just deploying microphones and recording them. Wow. And then what was really cool also about those gigs is we're using a lot of ambisonics.
Oh.
And I had never used a binaural microphone for anything like that before, but Sphere has money, so they had a couple of the Neumann head mics that we got to deploy. That was a lot of fun.
That's cool. So typically we use the binaural microphones to make recordings for headphone playback, how did they end up translating through actual physical speaker systems in this case?
I have no idea. I haven't heard it yet, and I haven't. I guess one of the things that kind of sucks about what I do is 9 times out of 10, I do the recordings, hand them off,
Oh, yeah.
and then they're in somebody else's hands, and unless there's a problem, nobody contacts me.
Yep.
So I don't really know. I did get to see a small sliver of the U2 show, and it all sounded really great, but how they made it sound that way, I couldn't tell you.
Wow. So about how many tracks did you record for this?
I would say probably, I'd say between 16 and 20.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it wasn't too much. We just basically, we deployed, we used, what kind of mics did we use? The Earthworks mics, and we just, I think 3 or 4 on every level.
Uh-huh.
And then later on, after U2 wrapped, we went in and we permanently installed all those microphones.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So that was, you know, not a fun job necessarily. I mean, soldering, a lot of soldering. Late nights, we had to do everything overnight because they run the venue during the day.
Yeah.
So it was a week of overnights. But yeah, we ended up going in and permanently installing what we did for U2 for Dead & Company. So that way every other show that comes to town, we can just go to the control room at Sphere and record there, because we were doing everything like it was a field shoot, where we were recording everything for U2 on field mixers.
Very cool. So one of the additional challenges that you have while you're trying to make everyone sound good is that in television production and film production, you're trying to not be obvious about recording them. In a recording studio, you just hang a microphone in front of somebody's face. But when you're recording Gordon Ramsay and all of the activities that are going on in the kitchen and the restaurant, you don't want to be obvious, and yet you've got to get great sound. What are some of the challenges and solutions that you've faced with regard to that?
I think the big thing is mic selection. Choosing the right microphone, and then placement. Those are the 2 big things. Being able to place a microphone in a spot that you're going to capture the voice or the performance without hearing any of the noise outside. So in a kitchen, as an example, you know, in television production, we usually use omnidirectional microphones. I'll throw a couple manufacturers out there. So for a really long time, I was using Sanken lavaliers. They sound great. They're very warm, but the mic pattern is very wide.
Right.
So that's the opposite of what I need in a kitchen environment, where there's a lot of clinking and clanking and fans and people yelling and screaming. So for Gordon's shows specifically, I use DPA 6061s. And the reason I use them is because they sound amazing, number 1, but number 2, their polar patterns are really tight. And so as long as you have good placement, and good placement with these microphones could be the difference between half an inch.
Right.
And so just making sure that the placement is good is critical. And that the microphone does all the work, which is the beautiful thing. As long as you got placement, you're rocking and rolling. And then clothing rustle. And so having the tools to reduce or eliminate any type of clothing rustle is really important. So we'll do stuff like, there's a manufacturer called Bumblebee. They make wind protection for lavalier mics. For a show like Kitchen Nightmares, where our talent are going inside and outside, we'll put Bumblebees on the microphones, but they also help with any type of clothing rustle.
Oh.
You wouldn't think it, but it does, and then they're super transparent, so they don't color anything, they don't muffle the mic in any way, so everything sounds really, really great. And I think just that, like, don't overthink it, just place the mic in a good spot and let talent do their thing, and you're off to the races. I also don't process. Like, I'll engage an EQ and I'll put in, maybe a high pass filter.
Right.
But that's it. That's it. I want the microphone to shine, and I want post-production to have everything.
Right.
So I don't EQ unless it's absolutely necessary, and 9 times out of 10 I'll move a microphone before I'll touch an EQ. And so keeping the processing to a bare minimum has always been. I'm kind of a purist that way.
That's cool. So there are so many things I want to ask as a follow-up question, but before I do, if you have questions for Fernando, please go ahead and drop them in the chat. We'll get to as many as we can in the course of our discussion here today. But so the number of things that go into you making those decisions actually kind of fascinates me. And for our more advanced students who are watching, how you made those decisions will matter. For the less advanced students, the earlier students, probably just helping to understand all of the things that go into those choices will be in education in itself. So you need to understand the microphone characteristics, the microphone patterns, and not just the nominal pattern, but how well it actually, how good a cardioid is it, how tight a cardioid is it. The acoustics of the actual space and the reflective surfaces and the absorptive surfaces around, and where the people that you're picking up are. I could go on, but we've only got 45, 50 minutes here to talk. So can you talk just a little bit about those different factors, how they go into your decision making? And let's all recognize the fact that those factors are the same whether you're talking about film production, television production, studio production, game audio, podcasting, live events. So can you just kind of elaborate on some of those factors?
Yeah, I think the big thing is just trying to get your hands on as many different types of microphones as you can. I kind of geek out anytime I have an opportunity to get my hands on a mic that I've never used in a practical application before. I just like to goof around with it. One thing that I do, as an example, let's say I have a shotgun microphone that I've never used before. I'll sit in front of a radio or a television, and I'll just move the microphone back and forth in front of that sound source, just to hear where it starts to dip off, how quickly and how drastically that happens.
Yep.
And then when I get a call to do a show or to work on a project, a lot of times I'm asking questions about our environment. Where are we shooting? Is this an indoor or an outdoor thing? So I know, do I need wind protection? Do I not need wind protection? A lot of times if it's a scripted thing, I've worked with a lot of actors that just refuse to wear microphones, which is fine. I'm cool with that. We have boom poles, and a lot of movies and television has been shot in the past without lavalier mics.
Right.
So it's something that's absolutely doable. But if I know those things ahead of time, then I might say, okay, well, I'm going to use a Schoeps shotgun mic versus a Sanken shotgun mic because it's warmer and it's got a much broader pattern. That way, if I have to cover multiple people, or if I have somebody that's being really dynamic, I know that I'm covered, versus a Sanken shotgun mic that tends to have a very narrow polar pattern that might be better used in a really noisy environment versus a controlled environment, which most scripted stuff tends to be a little bit more controlled than any type of a reality show or documentary or anything like that. So a lot of it's a lot of guessing, to be honest, and sometimes you'll show up on set and it won't be great. And so then it's just like, okay, well, how do I pivot? Did I bring extra microphones with me that might give me a better sound? Or maybe I just need to do a better job at mic placement.
Right. Well, one of the things that's not guesswork is the research that you put into it ahead of time. And I'm going to get preachy for just a second, but I'm the program director. I'm entitled to do that occasionally. So in the recording principles class, one of the assignments is to have the students take their microphone. They get a condenser microphone and a dynamic microphone. They're both cardioid, and they're assigned to record their voice on axis, and then 90 degrees off axis and 180 degrees off axis, and then describe the difference in sound.
Right.
And it's understandable that a lot of students think, okay, so I recorded it, my files are good, I've described it, and I'm pretty happy, and I'm done with the assignment. And what you're telling me is that that's not an assignment, that's a lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to go into your memory bank. And, you know, sometimes you're going to, yeah, I just think, you know, also production never happens the way that it's planned. Everything is always just a little bit, something always happens that throws the plan off. Mm-hmm. So having knowledge of how things work will just make it that much easier for you to pivot and to still deliver the best product that you can deliver to your client. Because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that really matters.
Right.
Is that everything sounds great on whatever it is that you're trying to record.
Right.
So it's absolutely, I would say that is a great lesson for students to use long after the class is over.
On every microphone that they ever can get their hands on.
Forever and ever and ever, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think also what ends up happening is after you've worked with certain microphones for a certain amount of time, like Sennheiser 416 is a standard shotgun microphone that everybody should have in their kit if they do production sound. I can tell you exactly what my 416 is going to pick up as soon as I walk into an environment. So I know if it's the right microphone for the job. That being said, 9 times out of 10, the 416 is the right microphone for the job.
There's a reason that
it's the
standard tools
exactly.
are standard tools, yeah.
Right.
Doesn't mean they're always the best choice, but there's, you know,
absolutely
behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. And 9 times out of 10, if I don't know what I'm getting myself into, that's what I start with.
Right.
Just because that's the mic that I've had the longest in my kit. It's the one that I know the most. We've spent more time together than I've spent with my family. And so I already know what that mic is going to deliver. And 9 times out of 10, it's exactly what I need.
That's cool. So you also have become well known for your comms, which is kind of a broad term, and frankly, most of our audio production students don't really understand what that is. So can you give us a brief description of what that means and how it applies to a show like Kitchen Nightmares?
Sure. So I just after the pandemic, I just really, the need for intercoms for some reason became more important after the pandemic. People wanted to have wireless intercoms to be able to communicate with each other without invading personal space. And I had actually been putting off getting into intercoms for quite some time, mostly because of the price point. All the good stuff is outrageously expensive. And of course, clients don't want to pay for expensive things, so it's a harder sell. So for those of you that don't know, intercoms is just basically a communication system. You'll hear the term PL, which stands for private line. And it's just a way for people on set to be able to communicate with all the different people in different departments, people in your own department. The system that I use is made by Riedel. It's called Bolero. Right now, I only really work with the wireless systems. And as far as Kitchen Nightmares is concerned, I actually use that system primarily as a listen for producers. We had different mixes that were happening at different, all at the same time. And so rather than giving producers a traditional IFB receiver so that they could hear these different mixes, I gave them belt packs so that they could listen to whatever mix they wanted at any time, 2 of them at the same time if they wanted it. They could work kind of how they wanted to. I also run, I think the best part about my system is because it's all wireless, the executive producer who's communicating with Gordon is also wireless. So the 2 of them can have a 2-way conversation between his IFB and his microphone. and the executive producer doesn't need to be in the control room for that.
Nice.
So if that person is the type of person that likes, like on season 1, the executive producer liked to pace. He had to work off some energy, and so he'd be in the control room just pacing. If I had had a panel in front of him, that would have been really difficult for him.
Right.
But we actually, on our last episode, he was hiding behind a tree watching production happen. And then as he walked past me, he was like, I love that this is wireless. And him and Gordon are just having a two-way conversation. And so, yeah, so it's just a communication system. It's just a system that allows everybody in the production to hear what they need to hear and communicate with whoever they need to communicate with.
Of course, our show production students who are producing this broadcast behind the scenes are going, duh, everybody knows that.
Right. Well, see, and I think one thing too, going back to talking about, being versatile, my whole thing has always been, if there's a microphone, then I want to learn about it.
Right.
And even though these microphones aren't necessarily being recorded, there's still a microphone on the headset. And so I don't want somebody from video doing that because they're focused on pretty pictures. I would rather be the person that deals with all of that because there's microphones. And I get a little flack sometimes. Some people that are a little bit more traditional, like traditional feature film mixers, will say, nope, that's a video thing. I disagree. If there's anything audio tied to it, it's an audio thing.
Yeah. Well, anyone who's ever heard a garbled message over a department store intercom knows that it makes a difference to have the right person making the decision as to what the input of that announcement is.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And taking responsibility, I think it also shows your clients that you're in it.
Yeah.
Right. I could say, that's not my thing, but then why would you call me for the next one if you have to hire me plus somebody else?
Right.
Right. I would rather just this all falls under the audio department now. If it's a really big show, I might have an intercom person, but that person's part of my team, and that all falls underneath the audio or the sound umbrella.
Right. So you said you actually started getting into the comm side of thing after the pandemic hit. What other sorts of things changed for you post-pandemic?
In terms of?
In terms of the types of work that you were finding, the different types of problems that you encountered, anything?
Well, I think the big thing for me after the pandemic, as production started to pick back up, we were still having to do COVID tests, and we were still having to mask up and do all of these things. One of the things that I didn't realize until after the pandemic was production sound interfaces with everybody, right? We're touching the talent, we're putting mics and IFBs on them. We're touching the cameras and interacting with cameras by sending audio and timecode to cameras. We're dealing, of course, with production. We're interfacing with makeup and wardrobe. Oftentimes, we're wiring up talent as they're wrapping up their makeup and wardrobe. So one of the things that I did is I ended up contacting the owner from Zaxcom so that I could get into a Zaxcom system because their systems can be remotely controlled. And so today, that's my main system. And it's great because if I put a transmitter or a microphone on somebody and I need to change the frequency, I can do it remotely. If I need to change the gain, I can do it remotely.
Wow.
So as long as my placement is good, I don't have to touch talent again. And so that was really important coming out of the pandemic. Today, not so important, but now it's how I work.
Right.
And so, and that has actually proved to be a really great system. I did a project, it was a promo for, I think it was the Country Music Awards with Peyton Manning, and he was a country artist, and I can't remember his name right now. But anyway, the two of them were doing promos together. We had like 4 hours to set up the show.
Tim McGraw?
No, it wasn't Tim McGraw. Brian something.
Oh.
I'm so bad with talent names. It's horrible. But in any case, we had like 4 hours to prep, and I thought I stress tested everything properly. My RF was looking good, everything was sounding great. And then once I got Peyton wired, on his first take, he starts taking drops. Thankfully, he flubbed his lines on the first take. And as he was reading the script, trying to familiarize himself with the script, I changed his frequency, but I didn't get up. I stayed right behind my cart and I did everything remotely. So it's really great because when stuff like that happens, nobody knows that there's a problem. I don't have to ask production to stop. I just hit a couple buttons and everything changes, and we continue shooting. So it's helped that way too. So I don't have to worry about stopping production in order to make things right. I can just handle everything remotely.
That's very cool.
And it sounds great. The Zaxcom wireless really sound great.
Well, that's fantastic. Cool. One of the things that I was looking over your website, I was kind of, stalking you, cyber stalking you, and saw that one of the services that you've been offering in recent years is a remote recording rig, which I think translates really concisely to the sort of thing that our audio production students are particularly focused on. Can you tell us a little bit about the thought that went into that and the way that those systems were designed to work?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, when I was stuck at home like everybody else, I was trying to figure out what can I do to continue working, even if that meant working from home. And I got together with Mike Orlowski, who works here at Full Sail, and we spent a couple months working out how to record remotely. So we ended up building a system that could be used for voiceover, ADR, that kind of stuff, where we basically deploy a system to a talent's home. They open up the box, they plug it in, and as soon as the system boots up, I have access to that system from my home studio. Mm-hmm. You can record in the box that we send to talent, as well as recording remotely. And so it's kind of a redundant system. Mm-hmm. Where you can have your local record. That way, if there's any latency issues or anything like that with the transfer getting to you, it's all good. You don't have to ask the talent to do it a second time, as long as the beef was like the nuts and bolts of what you're trying to capture are there.
Right.
You know that it's recorded locally on the system that is in front of the talent. So yeah, we spent a couple months kind of working out how that was going to work, figuring out exactly who had a better system for the remote side of the recording. Mm-hmm. And then we built a small little package that we could deploy to talent's homes.
That's cool. What software did you base that on?
We were using what were we using? We did it a couple different ways. We used actually a lot of it was on Zoom. Mm-hmm. Surprisingly,
yeah.
We used. The system itself was a Pro Tools based system. Uh-huh. So we had Pro Tools built into the system that we deployed to talent's home. And then, of course, I had my system. I think we were using, it wasn't Source Connect. Man, I wish I could remember right now. I can't remember what we were using. It's slipping my mind right now.
Was it the Audio Movers Listen To?
It was Audio Movers. Yeah. Yep. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it worked great.
Yeah.
It was awesome. And then we used a program called Jump Desktop, which I think you can download for $29 on the App Store for the remote control side. So it wasn't outside of actually buying all the hardware and getting the physical packages put together. The system that was controlling the remote system was just a $29 program.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, that's some pretty ingenious system design for you guys to put that together in a way that's really turnkey for the talent on the other end.
Yeah, that was the most important thing. Is we wanted it to be small enough to where it could ship and it wasn't intimidating for anybody, but then we wanted to make it really simple. So the way we built the system, you plug in power, you hit the red button to turn it on, and then we set it up so that all of the programs that needed to fire up in order for everything to work just fired up.
Right.
And then as soon as Jump Desktop went online, a little icon would pop up on my computer, and then we could go ahead and get started.
Wow.
And now I use Jump Desktop on all of my computers. So, like on Kitchen Nightmares, as an example, any of the laptops or any of the record computers that we were using for the show, I had control of. So if I wasn't on set when something went wrong, I could just open up my laptop and help.
That's cool. So, forgive me for nerding out a little bit, but you were telling us over lunch that you had a chance to do a small part of the Ghostbusters Afterlife movie. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I have a friend who I met. I was a utility on a commercial, and the mixer on the show his name is Steve Morrow. He's an amazing sound mixer. He does a lot of big movies. A lot of the movies that he does are usually in the list of Oscar-nominated films. And we got to know each other after working on this commercial. We became really good friends, and he worked on Ghostbusters, and they had a pickup shoot that they needed to do, and he asked me if I wanted to do it. And before I even knew what it was or what we were going to be shooting, I just wanted an opportunity to work with him. Turned out he wasn't on it. He was trying to pass it off on me. I just didn't know what the project was. I said yes before he told me. And so I had an opportunity. It was a one-day shoot. There's a little hidden scene at the very end of the movie, and that was the scene that we shot. Unfortunately, they didn't use any of our audio. There was no script. So, although there were a couple lines that were said on a couple of the takes, none of it got used. I didn't get credit, but I don't care because I got to work on the last day of the movie. I got to sit behind Jason Reitman and watch him direct. And I got to work with Ernie Hudson, and just being a product of Ghostbusters is part of my generation. So just to be able to be on the same set as all of those people was pretty amazing. Definitely a pinch me moment.
That's cool.
It was a short one, but it's a good one.
I understand the set itself was pretty amazing and incredibly detailed.
Well, the set was the original firehouse that they shot the original Ghostbusters in. It's in downtown LA. It's in complete disarray, and they didn't do anything to it. It was supposed to look kind of crappy,
right?
And it did. But it was really kind of neat because at the end of the shoot, Jason, the director, basically told everybody that it was a special shoot for him because when his dad directed the original Ghostbusters, he was 8 years old and was sitting on the staircase watching his dad shoot this. So it was a really special moment for him, and just to be able to sit behind him and watch him direct, that was, again, it was just one of those pinch me moments.
Yeah, that's too cool.
Yeah, very cool.
Well, there are multiple things that fascinate me about that story that have nothing to do with audio per se. One was the way that you got the gig by personal relationships with other professionals.
Right.
A person who you met on a commercial shoot through relationships and recommendations that turned into an opportunity that came directly from him.
Right.
Which is a huge lesson. I mean, at Full Sail, you walk in the door and we start talking about networking. You see that person standing next to you? Introduce yourself, talk to them, get to know them. And it applies in our online context as much as it does on campus, except that you have to actually be a little bit bolder about reaching out to each other in the online world. And the other thing is that you said yes to the gig, which I think is a really important thing for people to be not boxing themselves in and saying, yeah, this is the thing that I do, and I'm going to say yes to things that fit within this box. You need to say yes to things and then be sure that you're up to the challenge.
Even if you don't think you're up to the challenge, you probably are. I find 9 times out of 10, it's more nerves than anything else that prevent people from doing stuff. Every job that I can think of off the top of my head, I got because of a recommendation from somebody else that I had worked with. So that one in particular, I met Steve. I was supposed to mix a commercial. Excuse me. A couple days before the shoot was going to happen, the production management called me up and told me that Ben Affleck was going to be directing the commercial as well as starring in it, and that he wanted to bring his team, and the production wanted to accommodate. They wanted as many people that he was comfortable with to be around him. And so Steve came out to do the job. They asked me if I'd be okay being his utility. I haven't done utility work in a really long time. But I said yes anyway. I was like, sure. I mean, because at the end of the day, I was thinking to myself, if this person is the kind of person that's working on Ben Affleck movies, then maybe I could learn something from him. And so we did 2 or 3 days together. We became friends. And I want to say it was only a couple of months between the time that we did that commercial together to the time I got the call to do the Ghostbusters thing. And the funny thing about that was I thought I was going to either be a boom op or a utility for him. And the only reason I said yes before I knew what we were doing is because I thought I was working with him. And as it turned out, he wasn't on set. He was passing it off to me. And when I called him and I was like, what the hell? I thought I was going to be working with you. He said, you're not a boom operator or a utility, you're a sound mixer. So, so that's how that job happened. Kitchen Nightmares happened because several years before that, there was a show called Next Level Chef, which was another Gordon Ramsay show that was coming to Vegas. And a video engineer who I had worked with a million years before, in fact, I hadn't talked to this guy in probably 5 or 10 years, but he knew I was in Vegas. He called me up one day and he asked me if I was still in Vegas and if I was still doing sound. I said, absolutely I am. And so he passed my info over to production on Gordon's team. And that's turned into, I did Next Level Chef. That was a great show. I did the 1st and 2nd season of Kitchen Nightmares. I did this little thing for YouTube called Idiot Sandwich. And now I'm talking to his team about doing a new show at the beginning of next year. Oh, and cool. And that was all through a recommendation of a video engineer. And so, every job that you do is somebody's gonna recommend you. There's got to be a way for production to get your phone number. So it's always going to be, whether it's somebody in production that knows you, a video person that knows you, an audio person that knows you, somebody is going to throw your name in the hat for you to get those calls. So I think it's just really important to just show up with a good attitude. And even if it's something you're not excited about doing, just 100% every time. Be kind to everybody, be friendly, shake hands, kiss babies, whatever it is that you need to do so that everybody knows who you are and they know that you're, a decent human. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think that's really it. I can't think of a single job that I got just because somebody looked me up online or something like that. That doesn't happen. Right. At least not to me.
Right. Well, as you say, be the kind of person that people want to work with. I mean, to start with, you got to deliver the goods. Right. You need to know your stuff. You need to listen carefully, not just to the audio sources, but to directions and all that kind of stuff. But we assume that everybody in the industry has the basic skill set. So who are you going to call? You're going to call, sorry.
See what you did there.
Yeah, I know. It was kind of in my brain. You're going to call the people that you enjoy working with, people that you had a good vibe with and who delivered and understood what their role was.
And I think also, so people that work in production, meaning production managers, production coordinators, line producers, all of these people are managing every department. And so one of the things that I always try to do is I try not to drain their resources. They've got a finite amount of resources, and if I show up 100% prepared, I have all the tools that I need, I have batteries, I have all the expendable items that I need for the run of a show, then I'm not going to production asking them for stuff. Instead, I'm walking into the production office and I'm saying, good morning to everybody, I hope you all have a great day. And then that's the last time they see or hear from me, unless it's something that I absolutely need.
Right.
And I find that that has helped me a lot as well. One of the criticisms that I'll get from production managers especially is that I'm very easy to work with. And what that really means is that I'm not giving them more work to do.
Right.
You know, I'm not coming to them at the 12th hour saying, hey, I need batteries or we don't shoot today. You know, it's making sure that I have all my ducks in a row so that I don't need to go to outside departments to make the show happen.
Right. We're in the business of problems being solved.
Yeah, and you don't want to be the person that's creating problems for somebody else.
Right.
I've done a lot of shows where production is just drained completely because, you know, the lighting person didn't have everything they needed, and the wardrobe people didn't have everything they needed, and the camera department didn't have everything they needed. And what ends up happening when those things happen is they go to production. And then production has to deploy all of their resources to make up for the lack of preparedness from all these departments. And after doing this for as long as I have, I recognize that. These people work a lot harder than I do. And like, I'm lucky, I focus on audio. That's it. That's all I deal with. These people deal with lights, cameras, audio, production, you know.
Yep.
And on some of the bigger shows, it could be, I think like on Kitchen Nightmares, there were like 300 people on the payroll.
Wow.
So if you're production, that means there's 300 people that you're dealing with every single day. I don't want to be one of them.
Yeah.
I would rather just be the person that says, good morning, have a good day.
Yep.
And then you don't see me for the rest of the day.
That's great. So we are out of time, and we got through about a third of the list of things I wanted to talk to you about, as I expected. So we'll have to have you back someday. But are there any closing thoughts you want to share with our students?
I think the big thing is be flexible, be open to different opportunities. Recognize when opportunities are coming at you. If you're really focused on one area of the business, that's great. Focus on that area of the business, but be open to working in other areas. You might be really surprised at how much you enjoy it, and you might be surprised at the challenges that it presents to you, spark something inside of you that gets you excited. That was certainly the case with me.
Right.
And just be open to any opportunities that might come your way.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much, Fernando.
Thank you.
As always, it's great talking to you.
Likewise.
Appreciate you joining us for this. So that's all the time that we have for today. We'd like to thank Fernando Delgado, Hall of Famer, Emmy-winning Sound Supervisor, and all-around great guy, for joining us for this conversation. And we'd like to remind you that we're here every month, typically the Monday of week 4, with the Audio Production Town Hall. So keep an eye on FS1 and classroom announcements to see when the next one is. Before we go, we'd like to thank this month's AVT class for production support. It's been a pleasure working with this team, and their course director, John Cost, for helping us out every month with this. Thanks very much, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you next month.